Churchill. I'm going to show you how to do the best trout fishing rig in New Zealand. It is mainly good for lakes, but I do fish it in the rivers. It just requires you to understand the rivers, and you'll see why as it go on. You're going to need 2 flies. Most of these you should be able to buy in any tackle shop, and they come in many different colors and variations, and I think that's just where you should try and experiment and buy as many. The first one, it's got a bit of a funny name. It's called a booby. It's a floating fly. It's meant to represent either, fish swimming in the water or a really large nymph, but mostly probably just a freshwater fish. It's usually got a lot of sparkling on it. This is my favorite that I've been able to buy. It's got a nice little red tail. I feel like that really works well. I've caught fish in every weather possible in any time of the year. If you're able to cast out far enough, you're able to catch fish. The other one is the glow bug. This is one of my favorite colors. There used to be one you could buy years and years ago, but they don't make them anymore. So this is my second favorite. But honestly, just try whatever you've got, wherever you can. If you have to buy online, it's usually a bit more expensive, but they're called the booby and the glow bug. And the way you do this is a very, very, very simple, easy technique. The first thing you'll need is a sinker with a swivel. You can just have a normal swivel. So just imagine that as a normal swivel with a running sinker going onto your the line to your rod, and then from this end your trace. The length to your first fly depends on where you are. If you're fishing a very, very deep lake, an example, very popular rig for this is Lake Tarawera in Rotorua, but or Lake Taupo, specifically Lake Taupo, you would want in some places where the water gets really, really deep, you want a very, very long trace. But on average, in your average water that I've fished, you want it to be about an arm's length to your chest, to the middle of your chest. That should be a good length for your first fly. So about 1 meter long. I cut it a little bit off. You tie a uni knot or a clench knot. And this is really important. Where you tie this fly actually matters quite a bit because of the way it presents. If I'm going to have a glow bug on the bottom, I will actually tie it on the bend of the hook, and it will make sense because if you're going to be tying it through the eye, it's going to be sitting like this, upside down, and you're not actually going to be able to see the hot spot. And vice versa, if I'm using the booby to be at the bottom, I will always tie my first knot onto where the hook is. And this is just actually something I learned over just using this rig for years. I used to not care until I actually found out that when I was just struggling one day. I wasn't able to catch anything. And I decided, maybe it does matter. I'm just going to actually see if I can tie it on the bend of the hook for the first fly. Obviously just tie whatever knot you're comfortable with. So that's going to be your first one. Yep. And this tag end is going to actually go to your sinker. And I'm going to tie it onto my sinker, and just your normal sinker. I didn't want to set up a whole rod just to show you. I think you guys could pretty much understand what's going on. There, tie that on. And you want to use a fairly heavy sinker. You actually really want to cast this pretty far. This rig works pretty well on deeper lakes. So you see, that's where it's going to go to the sinker. And you'll see as this goes up, if you imagine it's floating up, it's actually going to have a very natural presentation. So it's going to float up in the water. This is your tag end, holding it there. It's going to sit upright. And when fish are actually you're not usually moving this fly, so the fish are actually going to look at this for quite a while. And if your presentation's off, if your fly is sitting upside down like that, it just doesn't look right in the water. And I've even tested it with in a few lakes where I could actually see the trout right in front of me, specifically in winter. And I would have very light sinker and a shortish trace, and I'd put this down and I tested if it's if the fly's sitting the wrong way down and the fly's sitting the right way up. And I always caught them when the flies are in the right presentation. That's just one of the things with trout fishing, is you just have to have the right presentation. And if you're fishing for rainbows, they can be a lot more forgiving than browns, but even then, rainbows can still have tricky days, and it's just right to do things the proper order. The order on the flies. If it's summertime, I will have my booby at the top. If it's wintertime, I will have my glow bug on the top. That winter time's usually when the trout are spawning, and they're more likely going to go after the egg than they are going to go after the booby. But if you found that the trout where we are just never hit it, they never ever touch the glow bug, just get a couple of boobies and put them on, or just even a single booby is really good, especially if it's like middle of summer and you're in a really tricky body of water. The fish are usually, they're a little bit harder to catch. Just going for a natural looking booby and just a single one of the, natural looking booby, single one. And I think this is just where experience and understanding your water can become crucial. But if you just took this black fly and this glow bug, you should be able to catch a trout. Where the details come in is how many you're going to catch that day and knowing your water. And I fished all around New Zealand with this fly, with specifically black, and I've caught browns, I've caught rainbows. I've never caught a salmon, but I'm sure a salmon would take this too. And that's why it's my universal fly. I do have other variants of this. There's another fly that is a really, really bright white fly. When you're coming up to, like spring, summertime, when the weather starts warming up, I'll put on that white one and it just crushes. Just phenomenal. But it's not, year-round kind of fly. The glow bug, especially up in Rotorua and those areas where there's lots of rainbow trout, will always catch fish. I would say it's about 60% on the booby and about 40% on the glow bug, but I'd still rather have it than not have it at all. And rainbow trout they tend to be a lot easier to catch. You don't really need to worry about being quite stealthy with them. Some lakes you do, but for the most part, most lakes that you can fish where there's trout, having a glow bug on will do you a lot of good. I think the cool thing about this rig is there are so many different types of variants for flies, and you can just change it up wherever you are. And if you have quite a large variety, you can have 3 of these hooks on. You can have 3 different flies and see which one they're actually hitting. And you can actually start building like a mental database on when to use different colors. But in general, black is my go-to. Green would be my second favorite. White, specifically in spring. And then glow bug, usually light pink body with an orange dot or red dot. Perfect. You don't really need to try any other colors, though if you want to, you can. There is one called a clown glow bug where it's just a whole bunch of different colors. I've tried those. I have caught trout on them, but that's usually in the winter, and in summer they don't even bother with them. They'd rather eat the booby. But yeah, so I've got that one tied on. You can have 3, but as you'll see, the longer you make this trace, the harder it is to cast far away. The best line, if you've got a rod, straight braid is perfect for this. Because one of the things, and the biggest downside to this rig, is when the trout hit it, they will swallow that fly and most likely get gut hooked. The reason why I would use braid is because when you get your first bite, you can feel it and you can strike, and you will most of the time get it in the lip. And so if you're doing catch and release, you can catch these fish, have a good fight out of them, throw them back. But if you're just leaving your rod and just sitting it there and they take and you don't strike quick enough, you're most likely going to gut hook them. But if you're someone who likes to catch a fish and take it home and eat it, it's not that big of a deal. If you're going to kill the fish, it's just one of the problems with this fly. Another way to fix this, if you are not someone who likes to just cast a rod and just sit there and wait, there is another technique, and it's a lot like spinning, but I wouldn't use a sinker like this. I would actually have this sinker running, let's say it's, just a normal ball sinker or an egg sinker, running to a swivel, and you cast it out as far as you can. And what you do is you hold your rod tip pretty high and you reel in as slow as possible. And what will happen is your sinker will bump on the floor, on the bottom of the lake, and your fly will actually be dancing in the water. And the slower you go, the more delicate presentation the fly has. And often you will, it's just a really good searching pattern technique to use. One of the downsides to it, if you have a lake that's got heaps of weeds, is you just can't do that technique. You're just going to be catching all the weeds, and the trout are not going to hit when you have a giant ball of weed around your sinker and behind it is a fly moving. Like, as soon as there's weeds moving, the trout are just going to leave that area. So it's really good for sandy, bare bottom lakes, and that's a really great technique. There is another version where you can use a smaller sinker. You won't be able to cast as far, but if you do have a lot of weeds, as soon as you cast, you reel in, you hold your rod tip up, and you're just reeling in a bit faster. That means you get the mid column of the water, so if there are more aggressive trout, you usually catch them. I actually have caught quite a few big fish when I feel like there's nothing around, and I've had this out for about an hour or two, and I'm about to pack up. In order not to get at the weeds, I've cast it up, I've lifted my rod up real quick, and just reeled in as fast as I can, and I have caught trout pretty much right at my feet because they're actually chasing it, and that includes the glow bug too. I've caught quite a few just reeling it in quickly, and I've had the glow bug at the end, and that's just going through the water. But I wouldn't rely on that. It's just something that can happen, and it is really fun to see when you've got a big trout just pretty much right at your feet and it just swipes your fly before it gets too shallow. That's pretty cool. But those are pretty much the two main techniques you can use with this. My favorite is still casting it out and leaving it, especially if you've got lots of boats on the lake with all the waves going by. It just moves that fly. And if you're out for a couple of hours and you haven't had a bite with someone with this rig, I would just leave. I wouldn't even bother. I mean, after about an hour, I might go to a different bay or a different point, because you should be getting a trout within 2 hours. And if you're not, it just means they're not around. And one day they could be there and another day they're not. That's just fishing in general. But this is a really, really good pattern or rig to use if you're going to a new lake or you're just starting out and you don't know how to use the spinners properly, or you're trying out flies and you just don't know what you're doing, but you want to catch trout. This is the best and easiest rig. Just cast it out, and you can just vary things up. It's not a difficult thing. You just, first fly gets tied to the bend, second fly you tie at the eye. I'm just doing booby then glow bug. That's just the way it is. Doesn't, like I said, depends on the lake. You can do different things. Some lakes don't like boobies, some lakes only like glow bugs, and that can also vary in the times of the year. That's just where basic your more experienced knowledge comes in. Though I've never been to a lake where they haven't liked a booby, and I've never gone to a lake where they've never caught one on the glow bug. I usually have my second trace a lot shorter. Genuinely, you don't want them too far apart. One of the things that can happen if they're too far apart is you've got too much line. And so if you're trying to cast this super far, and let's say you've got 2 meters of line behind you, that's just not great for casting. Plus, these flies are not exactly aerodynamic, and they will spin in the water, which is why it's crucial. You have to have swivels when you're using this rig. If you're casting them and you're retrieving them, even if you're not retrieving them to catch the fish, they will twist up your line. It's also one of the reasons why they work so well, because they keep spinning in the water. It just attracts the fish. But yeah, so that's it. Second fly gets tied to the eye, and then this will get tied to the eye of your bottom fly. Use whatever knot you want. A pound of line you use. Go as heavy as you can. The takes on these flies are usually, it's not a little tap. Like, they will just smash it. And that's one reason why I actually, when I use this technique, always hold my rod. I have never had a rod taken away from me, because I'm usually pretty close to my rods. But I have had them fly in the water. Just because I couldn't be bothered holding them. And, I just quickly jumped in and grabbed the rod. And if you like swimming, that's pretty cool. But I'm not the biggest fan. And so that's usually how far apart you want. It's about 20 centimeters. I don't know what that is in inches. Almost a foot long. And you can vary this. You don't want it super close either. If it's super close, it looks unnatural. Having just a little bit of distance. If you're fishing a really big lake, and let's say there's not so many trout, but they're usually quite big, Lake Tianao is quite common for this. If you can have a fly, your top fly, being quite flashy, like whites and greens and yellows and some red, or even a glow bug, a flashy glow bug. You get ones with sparkles on them. I actually really like those, but they're pretty hard to find. Just having something like that, and having a short fly that has a more natural presentation, like a more native looking, maybe a light white that doesn't have too many sparkles, or this black one here, I think this is pretty natural. It's quite good for attracting a lot of fish in. And I can't prove this, but just from observation, when I've got this rig out, and it's fairly common, before you get a bite, I have actually had line bites. So I'm holding my rod and I'm feeling taps. It's not the fish hitting the fly, it's just the fish swimming around it. And it will happen for about a minute to 30 seconds. Sometimes it's a line tap and then a bite, which means it actually looks like fish are swimming around this. They're inspecting it. I have had it inshore, close to jetties, where I've just dropped this, like I said, very light sinker and a short trace, and I've dropped it down, and I've seen the fish just swimming around it. And then what will happen is something will happen. Either I twitch it, or I just don't do anything. I just leave it, and a wave will come in, and it just moves that fly lightly, and it will just be a violent take. They just go straight for it, and they smack it. Which means, and I've tried it with 2 boobies on, one very flashy and one quite like blacks or greens, and they'll take the green one, they won't take the flashy one. But that flashy one, when that moves, they won't always take it, but it does do something for the fish. Now this is for rainbow trout. Brown trout are usually a lot more clever. The smaller ones will take flashier things, but a big brown trout probably be a bit freaked out with something super flashy. There's a fly called the cat's whiskers. That's a booby fly. It's got a yellow body with a white marabou tail. I love that fly. That fly is really good for rainbow trout. If you've got stock trout where you are, this is it's just a really good lake fishing rig. Rivers though, you can fish it with rivers. It's difficult. It really is. You need a shorter trace. You want really only one fly. Most likely don't put on a glow bug, because if you're putting on a glow bug, that actually is a natural forage for trout, and that will have a specific flow, and it's really hard to get a good consistent flow with the current with this fly. That's actually where I would have a booby on, and quite small. I would have it about the length of your arm or shorter. Have quite a small sinker and a small swivel and a lighter line. In the rivers, when that's flowing down, what I'd do is I'll cast it up and I would slowly retrieve it in. You don't actually want to move the fly too much. The current with the sinker hitting the rocks will move the fly. And you want that to be flowing a consistent pace in more of the deeper water. You don't actually want it to be bringing closer to you, but you also don't want slack line. It's just a bit of a skill. I think if I'm fishing in the rivers and I'm going to be doing that, I might as well just be fly fishing, because I'll catch more with the fly than I will with this rig. But I actually decided one day to give it a go with a hand line. I did actually catch a trout. I really enjoyed fishing it with a hand line. I found out that's actually illegal. I read the regulations. You have to use a rod and reel. You can't use a hand line. I'm really sorry. I didn't know at the time. And it's actually quite easy with the hand line. You actually get a bit of feel, whereas the rod, I think, actually takes away from it. But there isn't really, if you're not interested in fly fishing, but you want to use flies in the river, I think that's a really good technique. And one of the cool things is, like, I learned to use this rig before I learned how to do fly fishing. And I used this rig in the rivers and I caught quite a few fish, but it actually helped me to learn how to cast my flies out, where for them to sit, how do I want my presentation to be, and it transferred quite nicely. So if you want to learn how to do fly fishing, but you're not 100% sure if it's really for you, try this rig. Make sure you cast it upstream and just feel what's going on. And if you really enjoy actually being in contact with your flies and feeling everything going on, and making sure you're following the current and everything like that, I think if you enjoy that, you'll really like fly fishing in rivers. This can also be, you can actually use this rig for fly fishing as well in the lake. You just have to use a sinking line. This is very common in England. It's pretty common in Rotorua too, but I would say more of an English fly fishing style. And it's usually quite a small trace. I usually have half the length. I might only have, the whole trace might only be 500 millimeters. And we usually, because what's going to happen is if you've got 2 or 3 flies and you've got a sinking line, that sinking line to a point will still float up. And the way that you actually fish this is you cast it out, and because it's actually a shorter trace, even though you have 2 or 3 flies or even one, it's actually quite easy to cast. And especially with a sinking line, that just shoots through your rod. You do very tiny strips. In fact, there's quite a few. My favorite is doing a big strip, waiting 30 seconds. Though I do actually do the technique where I just do a strip, about an inch strip, or an inch strip every 2 or 3 seconds. So it's a strip, wait a couple of seconds, strip, wait a couple seconds, strip, wait a couple seconds. Or you can just cast it out there and leave it. And if your lake has a lot of wind or boats going by, you will actually feel your line moving. Especially, this rig works really well with a lot of boats in deeper water. Or if there's like a smaller lake, but there's a river coming in, and that still causes current in the lake, and that will actually flow quite naturally, especially with your fly line, a sinking fly line. That's a great technique too. But there's one other, I've never seen anyone do this. Maybe it's maybe it's popular somewhere. I've never seen it on YouTube or anything like that, nor anywhere I fished. But actually fishing this topwater makes a really, really, especially the booby, makes a really, really, really good popper. If you've got lakes where there's lots of rainbows, it's usually a little bit on the smaller size, especially in summer when you've got all the hatches going on. I will have a fairly long trace about the length of my rod on a floating line, and I'll cast that as far as I can, and I'll do quite big pops, like that, just popping it, and you'll see it just splashing on the water. And the takes you get, oh, it's awesome. It's better than dry fly fishing. I love it so much, and it's quite fun. I can't believe I don't see a lot more people doing, but that is more season specific. That is usually when the fish are at the top of the water. I've tried it in winter. I have caught trout doing it, but I wouldn't say the most effective. And even in summer, it's not the most effective. But if you've got like 2 or 3 trout already, and you're bored, and you're like, oh, I actually just want to try something out this afternoon. I've already got some fish. Try it. Try that technique. Just a long trace. Usually, I wouldn't go any lighter than 6 pounds. 6 to 8 pounds is pretty good. Once you get to 10 pounds, that line's a little bit thicker, especially if it's sitting on the top of the water. It's just a lot easier for the fish to see. So between 6 and 8 pounds. And just popping that on top of the water. I tend to use either black or just the most outlandish bright colors, like pinks, purples, greens, like chartreuse. In fact, I have a fly that is, it's got white marabou, pink body, and a green cape, which is where I just wrap some marabou around the head. And yeah, I love that fly. That fly's I don't ever fish it heave and leave. It just doesn't work. But if I'm fishing on top of the water, I'll just strip it. Oh, it's just, yeah. There's probably a lot more different ways to fish this. I don't think I've even covered it all. I don't fish this often anymore because it does get a bit boring. If I cast this out and I don't catch a trout in 2 hours, I'll probably just go home. Like, because if they're not going to be hitting this, they're probably not going to hit my flies, or they're not going to hit my spinners. And it has actually become the point where I'll, specifically when I go fishing, leave these flies at home or any way of me tying it, because it just becomes too much of a temptation for me to just cast this out, and I'll just sit on the bank and I won't do any other kinds of fishing. And I brought my fly rod, or yeah, it's just kind of too good. There is actually quite a lot of hate for this. For those who know about it, there's a lot of hate because of it gut hooking the fish. People actually want this banned. Just because something works doesn't mean it should be banned. But I used to use this all the time, and it gave me a lot of confidence. I'm really grateful for this, because it gave me the confidence to catch a fish. And specifically when it took me so long to catch a trout using spinners, and especially when I started fly fishing, that if I was struggling, I'd just put this on and I'd catch something. And confidence is key when you're fishing. It genuinely is. So it's actually bringing a lot of memories. I probably next time when I go out to the lakes, I'll probably bring this rig with me. But it is really good. And if you're new to this, you should be putting this on. I learned about this rig after a year or two, started trout fishing and struggling. And the first time I put this rig on, I think it took me maybe 30 minutes, less. Caught a nice 6-pound rainbow, cast it out again, got some smaller fish. I was the only one who caught, including people who were fly fishing right next to me. And that just made me want to try it. And when I took people out fishing for the first time, especially in lakes, I would put this rig on, cast it out for them, and they would always catch trout. Yeah, I think that's it. If you've got any questions, This rig should be known at your tackle shop. You should be able to buy these flies, or at least a very close variant of it. If you can't, they do sell them online, but they're about $7 or $8, and that's just horrendous. But you could also even get into fly tying. It's a very simple fly to tie. I think it will cost you, all the materials to tie, at least the glow bug, should cost you about $20, but you'll make hundreds of them. And yeah, I guess that's it. Please let me know if you guys catch anything. Please let me know if you're having struggles with it. If it's not working where you are, that would be news to me. And if you are catching fish, let me know. Let me know what flies you're using, because the more we actually talk about what we're using, the better we can actually understand our waters and what the trout are doing, and the better fishermen we can become. Anyway, thank you guys. God bless. Hopefully you catch some fish.